You're working 80 plus hours a week?
Yeah, that's what it takes to do this. There is no 50-hour-a-week startup. So there is no such thing as a balanced life in startups. LinkedIn has over 10,000 employees now. Everyone's talking to each other, and we hold everyone, including the CEO, accountable for being part of the culture.
You've graduated on AI and on philosophy.
I came to Oxford to study philosophy and then concluded no one knew what thinking was and what language was. We are more Homo techne than Homo sapiens, which is we evolved through technology. Kind of a founding culture of PayPal. Hire this person who is aggressive, energetic, and knows that they need to learn. In Silicon Valley, you can see how fast and how aggressively other people are moving, and you have to be moving at that pace.
Go fast, break things, and then you ship to the next level.
Yeah, if you try to regulate everything in advance, you basically get no innovation. I think AI is the cognitive industrial revolution.
It's too big.
Nous sommes la moyenne des personnes que nous fréquentons. Je suis Matthieu Stefani, partenaire d'OVNI Capital, et je vous propose de rencontrer des entrepreneurs, sportifs ou artistes qui vont faire exploser notre moyenne.
Let's go. Let's try that.
Yeah, okay.
So I was telling you, Reid, that my wife Lucy is actually working at LinkedIn. You want some water?
Yes, please.
Sparkling or still?
Sparkling.
And you just asked me if she was happy, and I was about to say that the company has a very good vibe. I mean, people in the past told me that they had to leave LinkedIn because they weren't good enough, they didn't work enough, and they said that's a pity because it was the best place to work. And I think I don't know how. I mean, the fundamentals are very good.
That is delightful to hear.
Can you explain that? I mean, is there
company culture? You try to build a company not just for a really good product for your customers, but you try to essentially have a good. Well, I'll use the French esprit de corps, right? And so you deliberately create company culture, and I think the whole team has done a magnificent job.
How do you deliberately create this?
Well, so LinkedIn is actually my third startup, right? So where I was an operational executive, and so it basically one of the things you learn is to not only to interview, but to, would you like me to wear headphones too?
Yeah.
I'm good. Yeah. I've done podcasting. Done podcasting. Yeah. All good. Thank you. And so LinkedIn, what we did is everything from, kind of what is how do we interview people to try to have a selection for people who wanted to work, quite hard, but also wanted to do it in a way with a team, where we believe in trying to make each other as good as we can. And so the same way that kind of the philosophy of the product is, how do we help you with your best possible economic opportunities, both, kind of daily work and career and jobs? We wanted to mirror that in the company. And so part of, for example, in the company side is not you must work here forever. It's do great work, elevate your capabilities. The team should help that. And if you end up working here forever, that's great. But we're about transformation in your skills and your capabilities. And so we all give each other feedback, but feedback in a way that's constructive, right? So it's like I'll have, an exec come in and say, hey, we really need to make a decision on this. I think you've been delaying too long, right? Here's why. And it's like, okay, let's who are the people we need to get in a room? Let's get them all in a room today. Let's make the decision, et cetera. Anyway, that's kind of we put in, it's some companies put values on the wall that are things like be excellent, our values were, how do we, in every single decision we make, how is it that we're elevating our LinkedIn members, our unpaid subscribers, right, to having a better experience? And so if I were, for example, because I was the founding CEO, if I were making those decisions or making a decision that even, kind of an executive assistant thought was not in the right interest of the members, part of the reason was on the wall so she could point at, or he could point at the kind of members first and say, I don't think this decision is right for our members. So we have this place of kind of living in a really collaborative team environment where we're all trying to be high performance, but in a way that we're all also trying to elevate all of our capabilities.
And did it happen in reality? What you just said,
yeah. Well, that was the reason I always ask. I mean, when you said, your wife works at LinkedIn, whenever I meet someone, it was like, how's it working? Right? Have we maintained our culture? Because it was one of the things that was really important. There was a lot of things we've learned from the Microsoft culture when we combined with Microsoft, but it was also very important to maintain the LinkedIn culture. And so I've been, every time I meet LinkedIn people, I talk to them about like, how's it working? Is culture the same? Anything I need to do? Are we making the right decisions? Are we doing the right things?
Are you still involved at some point?
Yeah, well, I'm on the board of Microsoft.
All right.
And so LinkedIn's still there. But, I'd say I'm all of the executive team at LinkedIn has my cell phone. Right. And they can call me if they need to. And occasionally I reach out to them because I go, oh, I saw this and I think you guys should be doing this, or I want to talk to you about this at some point in the next couple of weeks. Is that, because I want to hear how you're thinking about this. Yeah,
actually, I think, Queenie, right? Yeah, and I think he has sent you a little message to say you should definitely go on that podcast. So thanks, Queenie.
Yes, exactly.
And do you have any idea of how do you make it? I mean, still pursue this company culture? How can you have it still 20 years later?
Well, one of the things you learn as a startup founder, as I mentioned, this is the third company actually, LinkedIn was the third company. I'm now on my fifth company of doing this. But you establish culture from the very first day. So when you're sitting,
you write it down.
Yes, you write it down. You're sitting with your co-founders and your founding team. You talk through what are the important things about how we're going to operate as a team, what kind of company culture, as I was mentioning, esprit de corps, what values you hold to, and then how do you implement that, and then everybody grows that. It isn't just from the founders, because it has to be, like, for example, one of my good friends, the co-founder of Workday, Anil Busri, and I learned this later, I would have done this too, but I learned from one of the things he did when he was hiring the first 500 employees at Workday. He was always the last interview because it was a cultural interview. It was hey,
500, that's a lot.
Exactly. And it was hey, are you going to play this game the way we play this game? There's multiple ways of playing the game. You can go be part of a kind of a high performance culture that's, we call each other names and, it's like, very testosterone. Or you can be other high performance cultures. And
both can work. Actually.
Both can work. And actually not all cultures are for all people. And so it's one of the things you learn. And the reason why it persists is because it's all, LinkedIn has over 10,000 employees now. Everyone's come in, everyone's talking to each other, everyone's reinforced that way. And we hold, everyone, including the CEO, accountable for being part of the culture.
Interesting. So I went straight into that episode just when you arrived. So just for everyone here listening to us, we didn't have time to chit chat, or I just take every minute I have with Reid.
Excellent. I love it.
Happy. So we're at the AI Action Summit in Paris. I'm so happy to have you on Génération Do It Yourself.
And I'm very happy to be here. And thank you for the coffee.
Yeah, welcome. It's something to talk to you, Reid. I've been reading about you and your books for a long time. You're probably one of the few people being on LinkedIn like for a longer time than I am, actually, because I think I was
longer time than most.
Yeah, obviously. But I've seen 2003, and I've been there since 2005, which is like I not oftenly find people who have been there for that long. It was another kind of a place? I mean, I believe you couldn't put post at the time.
No, not at all.
Just
It's
more or less a CV or something like this.
Exactly.
But still, you had the vision.
Yes.
Back in 2004, I've seen, read things, and it was really interesting. And the journey has been very long since then. Greylock, Inflexion.ai, a lot of books, blitzscaling that has been very mind-blowing for a lot of people. May I ask you, Reid, to introduce yourself?
Of course.
Because it's a bit hard. I mean, there are so many things to do.
Yeah, so I did an undergraduate degree in artificial intelligence and a graduate degree in philosophy.
In Stanford, was it?
At Stanford and Oxford.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that.
Too. Yeah. And part of that is my approach to technology, which I got into technology by having been a student at Stanford, is how do we help elevate humanity, human beings? And part of the reason why I kind of co-founded LinkedIn in 2003 was because it's in a network of people. How do we collaborate to help each other lead better lives, and in the LinkedIn case, better work lives? Being informed, being capable of what you're doing day by day, but also finding the right opportunities and having the right opportunities find you. And so before, kind of getting to LinkedIn, I did various technology jobs, learning skills, founded a company called SocialNet, then was part of the founding team of PayPal.
You worked at Apple, right?
Yes, I worked at Apple. It was my very first job after college.
Amazing.
Yeah. No,
you had some kind of nose. You were doing user experience. I was thinking, what was user experience in 92?
But Apple had, it was 93.
93.
Apple had kind of greatly pioneered the whole user experience.
You invented that stuff.
Yeah. Well, no, not me. It was Apple did years earlier, and part of it is because a humanist kind of how does technology help us be more human? You may or may not have read, one of the things that I've been writing in the last few years is that we are more Homo techne than Homo sapiens, which is we evolved through technology, right? Technology, glasses, technology, podcasting, technology, the computer in front of you, all of these things. And so I wanted to be kind of this kind of humanist end towards technology. And so when I was thinking about what job should I start with, learning to be a human user experience designer struck me as a very good one. It was an intense learning experience. I had no experience doing the job before my first day on the job. And I remember, kind of having my manager walk up to me and say, "Well, I need you to mock this up in Photoshop." And my
what?
Yes, exactly. What? And oh, you don't know how to use Photoshop? Okay, go to the bookstore, buy some books, be capable in 3 days. And I was like, okay. Right. So it was an intense experience and really great. And then had realized that I wanted to create new products, and that's what led me into entrepreneurship. There's a lot of different paths that people become entrepreneurs, and for me, it was I have some ideas about what kinds of things can help us, and I don't see those products anywhere in the world, so I have to go create them. And then that was SocialNet, which had all the ideas and also all the learnings, which in entrepreneurship, when you say what are the learnings, it's how much blood did you leave on the floor, how much tears did you leave. It's an intense experience. How
much money did you lose?
Yes, well, we were fortunate. Yes, we were fortunate in that we returned capital to our investors, but that was a hard fought to get there.
And you left the company before it was sold, right?
Yes.
So was it your own decision?
Yes. I had basically decided that, and this is part of the whole dance that entrepreneurs learn with venture capitalists. I had basically gotten into a disagreement with the VCs about how the company needed to operate. I had learned a whole bunch. They felt that the only thing we really needed to do was follow what other internet companies at the time were doing, which is advertising on television. So raise enough money, advertise on television. My view was, no, actually, the only time it makes sense to advertise on television is once you've saturated your distribution channels from online. And so it's this won't work. This isn't a strategy that will work. And so I helped them hire a new CEO, kind of transition. And then I was going to go start LinkedIn. I'd had the idea, and then Peter Thiel, who was the CEO and co-founder of PayPal, which I was on the board of, I was part of a founding board member of PayPal, said, no, don't do that. Come help us at PayPal, right? And I was like, well, but you guys have already built a company. And
he was a friend back from high school or
college.
College, right.
Yes, we met in a philosophy class at Stanford, and mind, matter, and meaning.
I would love to know about that philosophy class. I mean, it must have been some kind of different point of views, right?
Oh, very. We both walked up to each other after the first class and said, "I've heard of you," and then went out to go argue politics, and so then.
But still, what you just say is very interesting because it didn't. I mean, you still, at the end of the day, you still worked with him. I mean, you were like, you are disagreeing still.
Oh, yes,
to what I've read,
very much. Yes.
Very much on many, many things.
Yes.
Your friends?
Yes.
Okay.
Look, the important thing in friendship is not that you agree on everything. Matter of fact, I actually think one of the things that's very important in friendship is to go, if I think something that I know my friend would disagree with intensely, we have to talk about it. We have to get to an understanding about why we would have that disagreement. Doesn't mean that it has to resolve. Frequently it does. But it has to be why do you have your point of view? Because I think part of the compact of friendship is how do you make each other better people?
Yeah.
And you don't do that by agreeing with every foolish thing you might think. And so I think that's what's most fundamentally important. Not necessarily disagreement, but the helping each other grow and learn.
We'll get back to friendship because that's something you love, right?
Yes,
I mean, it's
exactly.
something you've been thinking about.
Yes.
All right.
So anyway, so Peter and I have been literally arguing fiercely since 1988.
Yeah. Let me come back to PayPal, but before that. You said you've graduated on AI and on philosophy back like in 1990 something.
1990 for kind of the artificial intelligence, which included a little bit of philosophy. I then concluded that people, and we still don't really know what intelligence is. I concluded that people didn't know, and I thought maybe philosophers did. So I came to Oxford to study philosophy, and then concluded no one knew what thinking was. And what language was.
This is just insane. It's been like 35 years you've been thinking about all of this.
Yes.
AI Action Summit.
Yes.
And my God.
Yeah. No, it's what I'm most interested in, obviously creating these new AIs is really amazing. But what I'm always first and foremost interested in is humanity. So how do we think? How do we speak? How do we understand each other? How do we understand the world? How do we understand meaning? Like, how does your lives have meaning? Our lives have meaning. And I got to AI because it was one of the ways when I was an undergraduate of thinking about this in a very different point of view.
But at some point, when you talk about, humanity, how AI will amplify our human abilities and help us build a brighter future. Or when I go on your LinkedIn, my current priority is investing in and building with AI to benefit humanity. I'm all about AI, right? Don't get me wrong, but there is something that rings a bell. I mean, at some point, it feels like synthetic humanity. You know what I'm saying? I mean, each time we try to go too far, like if you go on sugar and you replace sugar with aspartame, then you see it creates cancers. When you put too much screen time, then you don't walk enough outside. I mean, at some point there is a red light going like this AI thing. I mean, something is going wrong somewhere.
Well, not necessarily. It isn't. For example, there's a range of AI chatbots. As you know, because I mentioned earlier, I co-founded Inflexion AI with Mustafa Suleyman and Karen Simonian. And we thought that one of the things that was really important, which I think we've catalyzed the whole ecosystem in, was that EQ is as important as IQ. That when we interact with each other, it's not just a question of thoughts, not just a question of here is an information unit that is coming from me to you through language, but also the way that we live, the way that we connect with each other, the way that we kind of communication and expression and dialogue isn't just IQ, it's also the kind of the tactile, the physical, the emotional senses of this. And that's really important in how we create these new chatbots. And I think we were the first to do that. And I think that is now beginning to spread within the industry. So, like if you're talking to Inflection's Pi, I think everyone finds that it's like, oh, this is a really good pattern of how you're kind. And so I don't think that by making synthetic intelligence or artificial intelligence, you necessarily need to be unhuman or ahuman. And in fact, part of the reason, and I'm sure we'll get to this at some point, I wrote both Super Agency, my current book that's out, and Impromptu, the one before, was trying to show that we as human beings, we first start when we create a new technology of, oh, that's alien, like the internet, it's cyberspace, the phone, it's dehumanizing us, and then we figure out how to integrate it and it becomes part of us. And I think AI is going to be the same. I think that right now, it all seems like, oh my God, are we losing agency? Is it going to take our jobs? Is it going to misinform us? Is it, et cetera, et cetera. And actually, in fact, there's a painful process sometimes of learning and adaptation, we'll find it's actually going to make us more human.
Interesting. Well, anyway, in the recent past, a lot of things have made us less human. I mean, including in the work days, right? I mean, so. Well,
it's an ebb and a flow, right? So if you go all the way back to, for example, the Middle Ages, work was much worse for the vast majority of human beings. There was a small number of nobility who had everyone else doing the work, but on the other hand, there were wars, violence. There was a whole bunch of different things that was a challenge for everybody. And so, and then of course we get to the industrial age. We have to figure out how to put in child labor laws. We have to do a whole bunch of things because it's always the exploration of when we integrate this new technology, what's the way of organizing society? What's the way that we find our way to making that human? And I think that's another phase that we're in now because it's like, well, AI will change a lot of work. Like, for example, my guess is in maybe this year, maybe next year, certainly by the third year, when you're doing this podcast, you'll have an AI that's listening on this laptop and we'll be saying, oh, maybe you should ask him a question about this. Or I did an internet search on this thing he just said, and this might be a really fun thing to talk about.
It's wrong. He's lying.
or that isn't quite right. You should go back and correct him on this.
You said the opposite 2 days ago.
Yes, exactly. And we will go through our work, having these AI co-pilots, but it will make us better. Right? It'll be the environment that we're in. Right now, that seems totally alien, right? But in a very small number of years, it'll seem very human.
Yeah, but at some point it seems alien. But still, I mean, yesterday night, before going to bed, I was getting on my notes, preparing this discussion, this podcast, and I went from OpenAI, ChatGPT to DeepSeek, actually, and tried the exact same prompt. And I was like, at the end, I was like, yeah, that's reality. That's what I'm doing like every day. And I asked for more question. I asked the LLM to ask me questions so I could improve our talk. And actually, at the end, I was pretty surprised by DeepSeek. It was somehow better than ChatGPT.
Interesting. And which model were you using with ChatGPT?
It was 4.0, I think. Yeah. I didn't try the 01,
03.
03, yeah.
Yeah. I think they're different. They're different for different purposes. So GPT-4 is better for a very quick conversation, But if you're doing something more detailed, or for example, asking like a research question, what I'd recommend is you go to O3 and you do deep research. Now, I was showing this to a friend here in Paris last night, and we were talking about, because we were talking about like how AI might be able to help with various kind of green and sustainability environmental issues. And she's working on kind of PFAS water contamination, which is an issue that is, in every developed country, but also here in France. And so I showed her how deep research could create a baseline report that she could hand to a client. And it took 12 minutes, and it was the result of what perhaps like a person would do in 3 days.
Incredible.
Now, she's like, well, this is great because I would then ask my person to do this. It's not that I would not hire my person or not deploy my analyst, but I'd say, start with this and now make this much better. Right. And that's, I think, what we're coming to. And that's part of anyway, so back to the models. O3 deep research. Try that next time you're doing
I will definitely. Yes. The thing was that I took, we have like a prep document. So with a lot of information from my guest, and so I uploaded this prep document and asked, can you make the same with Reid Hoffman? And here are the questions and the thoughts and what I've heard and what I've read and so on. And I want something sharp and so in English. And the final document on ChatGPT 4.0 was okay, but it wasn't the same. Like the DeepSeek understood like everything. It was exactly the same. That's what I thought was better. But the question were okay on both sides, I would say.
And by the way, I've also used DeepSeek. It's a quality model, right? It did some excellent distillation from ChatGPT and Llama and you may remember from blitzscaling. China is one of the places where I've gone from Silicon Valley where I learn new things about building tech companies. So they're incredible technologists and hard driving entrepreneurs.
And I've read recently that you said, I think it was in Le Monde maybe or something in an article that when you go there, you see a place where they're going faster than in the US.
Yes, exactly. It's part of the reason. Many of my books are kind of different versions of the world as I found it, right? It's kind of like, here's what I found in the world. And the first 4 were all about kind of what I learned from Silicon Valley. And part of, for example, blitzscaling, which is the third one, is that the technology companies of the future are all built at speed. Like if you're not building it at speed, you'll be too slow. Other companies, kind of companies in other countries will build them. And so it's all built at speed. It's one of the things we've learned at Silicon Valley, hence blitzscaling. Now,
that's where like Elon Musk is just a master, right?
Exactly. No. And it's all of the great entrepreneurs coming out of Silicon Valley learn it from the intense competition, because part of the benefit you have in being in Silicon Valley is you can see how fast and how aggressively other people are moving, and you have to be moving at that pace in order to succeed.
It seems, let's stop on this a little bit, but I've recorded with a guy called David Gurley. He was, you know David? No, he was at Microsoft for a long time, working direct report for Bill Gates during the 90s. And he told me they had 2 product meetings a day. And you had to be sharp, like, and you had to ship like every day. I would say I could feel that in the culture at Microsoft during the 90s.
Yes.
But as a Microsoft board member, is it still, I mean, it's a bigger company now. Is it still about speed in a company like this?
Well, it's always about speed.
From the outside, it looks a bit not slow, but you have PowerPoint, you have all of these things. It's not like...
Well, so the challenge that you get when you get large, and Microsoft, Google, Amazon all have this characteristic, Apple, is you now need to move as fast as you can without breaking things, right? And
at the beginning it was
Yes.
go fast, break things,
Yes.
and now,
and then as the meta thing then moves to move fast with stable infrastructure, right? Because if you break fundamental things, it takes a lot longer to fix them. Now that being said, for example, obviously there's a lot of Microsoft, one of the largest companies in the world, the largest enterprise company with a whole bunch of enterprise relationships. Enterprises want very, kind of methodical engagement. And so you have to move at a certain speed in order to keep your customers happy and on board. That being said, look at what Satya Nadella, Kevin Scott, Sam Altman have done with OpenAI and Microsoft and kind of leading and the speed at which they're operating. So it isn't, Microsoft slow as much as it's Microsoft very large. And so only specific areas end up moving very fast, but they're still moving fast on the areas they're moving on.
I mean, at the end of the day, I'm very impressed by Microsoft because it's been navigating for like decades now, and it's still like on the top of the game, which is incredible. Same as Apple. You were at the board of directors of OpenAI also.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you were, I believe, some kind of pretty big shareholder.
I led the first round of commercial investment.
All right.
I also put in money on the first round of philanthropic donation too.
And so can you, when you're on this board of directors, can you be like an anthropic shareholder or some other companies, or it's
Well, you can be shareholders. You have to be careful on boards of directors in conflict. So I could be an investor in, just as I could be an investor, like a shareholder in both Microsoft and Google and Amazon and Meta, and I can be a shareholder, but I can only be on one of the boards.
all right?
Right, because your fiduciary responsibility for when you're on a board is that you're 100% about this company, and so you can't be on any boards that have any conflicts. Now, I don't think OpenAI actually, in fact, has conflicts, but it's once they launched ChatGPT, it was like, well, it's perhaps better to only be on one of these boards.
How much time do we have? Like 45 minutes? Something like this.
Yeah.
So let's go back to. I want to go back at the end on AI and philosophy because this is, I mean, to me, something that takes a lot of time in my mind. But since just 2 or 3 years, and I'm interested in talking about someone who has been thinking about this for 35
Everything
years.
is fair. I love the stuff you're doing on LinkedIn. Go wherever you think our audience would love to hear it.
Yeah, but I'd love to go back on PayPal and this mafia you've been part of for a while.
I try not to say mafia these days. I try to say network. But,
Network, I know. It's more politically correct.
And truthful, by the way.
Yeah. But it's true. So you've been working with Peter Thiel. Who was there? Elon Musk?
Elon was there. Roelof Botha, Max Levchin, David Sachs.
Amazing. So that was back. So you founded LinkedIn in 2003. So it was like for the 3 years between 2000 and 2003, something like this.
2003. I left PayPal in October of 2002 after we sold it to eBay.
All right.
And I was kind of the lead external guy. So, part of that sale process was one of the things. And then I felt that Silicon Valley had thought the internet was over.
Yeah.
Because the pattern that Silicon Valley has historically run on before till then, this is 20 plus years ago, was a new technology enters, everyone goes blitzscaling as fast as possible, and then you move to the next technology. And so in 2002, it was what we refer to as the internet winter. And so everyone thought, well, no, it's played out. It's Google, it's Amazon, it's eBay, it's PayPal, all the big internet companies have been built. And so Silicon Valley went to two things, green tech.
Already.
And that was, and enterprise software. And every venture capitalist was in the Valley would only take pitches on one of those two.
It was prior to Web 2.0, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, and actually, Tim O'Reilly created the Web 2.0 name. I was before him creating Internet 2.0. His name was better. And we basically, I was like, no, Internet 2.0, Web 2.0 is coming. And that's what I want to do. So as opposed to taking a year off, which was my initial plan, I basically went immediately to like saying, okay, I got to found a company. I got to be investing in companies because Web 2.0 is going to be big.
Did you even eventually took that year off? Since
no, nope. So it's still an aspiration, right?
Sorry.
And it's funny. Each time I'm planning it, something comes up, and right now it's AI is coming.
Yeah.
And so.
Never-ending story.
Yeah. Well, my friends and family are like, you should still take that sabbatical at some point. And it's like, yeah, no, they're totally right. And so anyway, and so that's why I started LinkedIn, and then I invested in Zynga and joined the board. And
Zynga, amazing.
Did a bunch of other things as well.
Before talking about LinkedIn, what are your takes on those years at PayPal? What I mean, if we're like more than 20 years later, we're in that AI thing, storm. If I'm 20 years old, which I'm not, you can tell, but what lessons should I take from that moment?
Well, I learned so much from PayPal that literally we could talk all day just recounting the lessons. More or less, that's probably true of every startup I've done, although PayPal was a particularly intense one because we started with an idea that was encryption on mobile phones, and I don't know if you remember these things called Palm Pilots.
Yeah, of course.
Right, a piece of historical technology, a little bit like the Flint spear, and then discovered that our customer base was actually doing peer-to-peer payments on eBay, and then pivoted into a kind of a peer-to-peer payment system with an entire focus. And while doing that, had a lot of kind of like co-opetition that was extremely fierce. So eBay wanted to own the service, ultimately did, but was initially competing with us. Visa and MasterCard felt that we were a competing payments network with them, so wanted to try to leverage the fact that they were they could control who and how you would use credit cards on PayPal to make the service not work. Our banks wanted to be doing this, so they were going to the regulators saying PayPal is illegal and unlicensed banking, and so it was just. And my job was to make sure that PayPal had the opportunity. My primary job was through all of these things had the opportunity to grow into the service that we know and love today.
What's interesting on all of what you're saying in between like politics, big companies, and it's at least in France, but I would say probably sometimes in some places in the US with the AI, the same thing. I mean, we're in the middle of things that are completely new, so people are not happy with what you're doing. I mean, I don't know, media, authors, everybody's worried about what's going to happen and what's going to be their position afterwards. So I don't know. It's the situation is more or less the same.
Well, it's every major new technology brings about this fear that we're going to lose human agency. And it goes all the way back to the written word. Socrates was, Socrates? I'm not
Socrates.
quite. Yes. So I'm trying to think of the French pronunciation. Basically said, no, the problem with the written word is that it loses this context that you and I are having right now, like where I can see how you're responding and be contextually relevant. And so the written word could actually, in fact, be then misunderstood by somebody else and miscommunicate.
Plus, it's engraved, so
Yes.
it cannot be undone somehow.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So all the way back to the written word, a loss of human agency. And yet, when we get to the other side and really start to integrate, we realize we have a massive increase of human agency. So, for example, you get the written word, I can write something, and people who don't know me have a chance to hear my voice back then. And now we're at this technology where people have a literal chance to hear our voices.
That's true.
Right. And so that's, I think, the path that we're on. But we always start, that's part of the reason I wrote Super Agency. We always start with maybe society's ending, maybe human agency. This is where the human agency stops.
The thing is that I don't know if you're an oracle or because you're always in the good shots, but if we go back then or now, at some point it's a bit flu. How do you say flu?
Fluid?
When you don't see, when you take off your glasses.
Yes, unfocused.
Unfocused. We don't know exactly where we're going with AI. We didn't know at the time where you were going with mobile phones.
Yes.
So at some point you have to trust the future or something like this.
Well, I think.
Sorry, and I will get back also to PayPal, but at some point it's something, at least in France, people hate about people like you and I, like kind of tech enthusiasts. It's like we're too confident in the future and we believe somehow maybe tech is going to solve problems. Like you talk about humanity and they're just like, those guys are just, I don't know.
So I appreciate those folks' concern for humanity. So the bringing things up and saying, hey, we care about this and we don't want to break the really wonderful things that are working and we're concerned about your discussion of disruption. So I'm sympathetic to all that. But unfortunately, they're just wrong. And the reason why they're wrong is that if you go back every 100 years and you go, would you rather live now or would you rather live in 1924? Would you rather live in 1824? Would you rather live in 1724? And by the way, you don't have to, the century makes it very clear. But it's also pretty true at 50 years and 30 years too, especially when you consider medical and a bunch of other things. And, even with over-romanticizing the past, which some people do, you go, well, wait a minute, it's a lot better now. I mean, the infant mortality rate in 1924 was massive, right? I mean, and what makes this progress? Fundamentally technology. Now, how we organize society and everything else, but like we have made a world. I mean, it's very funny because what'll happen is someone will call you on their smartphone and say, this technology stuff, this is very suspicious. And you're like, okay. Right. And they say, well, but that's fine. But this new, I don't know. It's like, well, yeah, but this was new, 20 years ago, right?
Talk louder. I can hear you without your phone. Right?
Yes, exactly. And so, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't have to be steered, right? So it's not close your eyes. Like the looking through a glass darkly is the poetic phrase, but also, like having your glasses off and kind of the blur. Yeah. And by the way, painful things will happen in the adoption of new technology. There is no way of getting new technology that doesn't involve risk, doesn't involve failure, doesn't involve error.
But this time, probably, I don't know. I'm as a European and French, I'm a bit mixed, and I'm probably more somehow probably American on this, but about overregulation, and because this specific time with AI, we talk about. What this moment when it's going to tip a singularity or this could change everything. I mean, maybe sometime in the near future, like a company, a country, two countries are going to be like way above, ahead everyone within a few days, within a few months, and I don't know. But can we regulate? What are we here for? I mean, can we do anything about that?
Well, so there is role for regulation, but the general mistake and there's a lot about Europe I love, and it's part of the reason I come over here, participate in these action summits and other things, because I want to help Europe also be, kind of leading in the world and stuff. But one of the problems with the regulation is, if you try to regulate everything in advance, you basically get no innovation.
Definitely.
And so, like when you look at the creation of software that makes a difference in the world at scale, almost none of it comes from Europe. The current high-flying example is Spotify.
Yeah.
Right? And
or YouTube. I mean,
YouTube was US.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Spotify is the European. I'm
right.
just
It wasn't. Yeah, you're right.
Right. But everything else is US or ByteDance, TikTok, China. Right. I mean, and so, and that's because the general European approach is you must cross all this regulatory threshold. So I already know that there are many products that are not being shipped in Europe because of regulation. So, for example, I just heard this last night, which is Google's AI model Veo is for making video is impossible to access here because European regulation.
Yeah, you have to use VPN, right?
Yes, exactly. And well, okay, if you say fine, that's what we're going to do, then as the new industry is created, and by the way, this will make a big difference in everything media. It'll make a difference in many things other than media. Say, okay, we're going to be years behind at the starting gate of a game that's accelerating. And it's a way to completely kill your industry for doing it. And I know that the EU is, Commission is well-meaning, but they're actually, in fact, harming their societies and people in this approach. Now, that doesn't mean no regulation. So what is a regulatory approach? First, you go, what are the absolute most critical things to not get wrong? Not the whole list of everything you don't want to get wrong, but the thing about I'd rather have the industry not exist than get this wrong, right? So you go, well, okay, I don't want to enable rogue states. I don't want to enable terrorists. I don't want to enable, massive criminals. Some crime can happen, but I don't want to enable that. Okay, so we'll have regulation specifically on that. Then you say, well, let's go through iterative development. And as we see things, let's then put in specific regulations for the specific things. So, for example, cars is a very good parallel, which is if we had said a car has to be 100% safe before we put it on the road, no cars, right? And even today in the US, we have 40,000 fatalities with cars per year. So, it's one of the least safe things you can do is to get on the highway in modern life, right? But it's essential for society. We were making it safer. So, for example, and this is a clear case where regulation was useful. Car industry did some safety itself, has done crash, collapsible things, airbags, et cetera. But the car industry is we don't want seatbelts. Our customers aren't demanding it, et cetera. And, it was well, look, we've done the studies. You're very clearly massive decrease in fatality. So you must ship your cars with seatbelts. And what's more, you have to beep at people until they put their seatbelts on, because even though they would normally be lazy and do this, that will help save a lot of lives. And it's a specific intervention. That's the way that we want to do the intervention. See how the thing's working, have measured something that's going wrong, and then go, this is a measurement that we should reduce. And if you're not going to do it and solve it voluntarily, or we can't solve it as objective measures, then we're going to intervene. And that's how regulation should work.
Go fast, break things, and then you ship to the next level, you said earlier on.
And break small things, not big things.
Let's get back to the because I interrupted you on that PayPal things you've learned, because I really want to get your view on what should we do now as entrepreneurs, as directors, CEOs, for small companies, big companies. What is the situation exactly now, and what did you get from those smaller companies at the time, maybe, that we could probably use right now?
So every startup, SocialNet, PayPal, LinkedIn, Inflexion, now Manus, I learn intensively every week. every single startup I've been part of, there's things on Friday that I wish I knew on Monday. And they're not like, Frederic won't return my phone call, right? Like that stuff. But like skills, decisioning, analysis, strategy, that kind of thing. And so, at PayPal, actually, one of the ways that I helped PayPal was when I started SocialNet, you start with a theory of the game, a theory of how it works. And I was like, you chart out an org chart. You go, I want people who've had at least 5 years of experience doing the product job, doing the operations job, doing the finance job, et cetera, et cetera. You look at resumes for people who've done this job before, you hire them, et cetera. In startup land, that's, those fundamental skill sets are important, but what you really need is fast learning and adjustment. And so part of the thing that I...
Buy the book and learn Photoshop, right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And so one of the things that, when PayPal was founded, there was Peter Thiel and Max Levchin, and then there were each of Peter and Max put one of their closest startup friends on the board, me for Peter and Scott Bannister for Max. And one of the things I was saying is like, look, one of the fundamental things that I wish I'd known at the beginning of SocialNet was, yes, you need to have a baseline skill, but you need to be learning and pivoting very fast. So let's not hire overly for you have been a product manager for 10 years at a large company, because by the way, you may have learned the long lessons for a startup. Let's have someone say, look, you know how to put together a product plan, you have an instinct around product, and you're learning very fast, and you're iterating and deploying. And then the second thing, and I had a lengthy argument with Peter about this, team sports is a very good thing to have. It's not necessary, but a very good thing, because you have a sense of a fluid dynamic situation where you have to be playing your role as opposed to being a prima donna. It's like no, we are playing this as a team, and we are in an intense, competitive, difficult, stressful situation, and we need to be able to navigate that. Yeah. And a good proxy is team sports. And so it was another thing that in Peter is very deeply libertarian. It's like, no, it's all about the individual. It's like, no, it's about the individual and the team. And so that became part of the initial founding culture of PayPal, which was, don't necessarily try to hire the person who has been doing this job for 10 years. Hire this person who is aggressive, energetic, learning, and knows that they need to learn this game here, the one we're in, the startup. And that, I think, is fundamental, because you have to pivot, you encounter new challenges, you encounter competitors, like every startup has one or more of what I call the valley of the shadow moments, which is, oh, we're going to die. Like this is a total bad idea. It's not going to work. It's a Titanic. The ship is going under, and you have to navigate that, because very rarely do you abandon ship in startups. Occasionally you have to, and you make that decision. But the real thing is, no, how do we get the ship to port?
That must be even more difficult in large companies. I mean, like Microsoft, or if you take like Boeing at the moment, or those companies, like where do you start? Can you give more or a lot of powers? The profile you just described is probably someone young, or can you be like this at 50,
yes.
60?
Yeah, it's a mindset.
All right.
Right. I think I'm still like this, right? And
I think I'm still like this, but maybe.
And I'm 57,
yeah,
right?
Okay.
So,
how often? How much? How do
remember, I co-founded a company.
Yeah,
late last year.
Yeah, and another one 3 years ago.
Yeah,
or, yeah.
Exactly.
How do you use AI? I mean, how many times a day? How much? How long? Which kind? I mean, what's your personal use?
So depends on the day. It can be many hours in some days and 0 in other days. It depends on what I'm working on. When I'm writing a book, many hours. When I'm doing a piece of research or analysis, many minutes. And when I'm having a discussion with a friend, now more often than not, if we're like, Like for example, unfortunately, I didn't have my phone with me when we were doing this. Is like my friend said, the bicycle was invented in France. And I was like, oh, that's very interesting. I'd like to know that. I would typically pull out ChatGPT and go, okay, where was the bicycle invented? What is the story of it, et cetera? And then get that. And, I might bring up a Wikipedia entry or I might, craft something. But, that kind of thing is then kind of part of the regular everyday action.
All right. That's more of a search, right?
Yeah. But like, for example, one of many the features of this is, as opposed to getting, kind of 10 links, you're like, what's the specific crafted, almost like think of it as Wikipedia-like answer for your question? Interesting.
What has been the most stunning, mind-blowing usage of AI you've tried recently?
Recently, I was mentioning the deep research is new, and deep research. Part of the thing that I think people are not tracking how we're going to have kind of I'll call it a society of agents, of co-pilots that are going to be helping us. And part of what I think you see with O3 and its deep research is it's like a little mini society of agents, because it goes out and researches a bunch of different things, and then it aggregates it for you and puts that whole process in. And so its ability to generate a report is simply kind of amazing. And so and you can see it also with ON, you can see it with DeepSeek and some other things, but like the fact that you can go, like, for example, one of the things I've been thinking about is how would, kind of Europe, Paris, London, other countries, kind of really amplify their software entrepreneurship ecosystems to try to help. And, I've been generating, like, it isn't that there is still like really good thinking. This is one of the areas I'm an expert, that I add in the really kind of different ways of thinking. But it gives me as opposed to writing out the baseline about like, well, what do you need to do in terms of startup formation, capital, incentives, labor laws, immigration, a bunch of other things in order to make this work. It provides all of that. And then I add in the expertise areas, and then I can make a report.
Very interesting. I'm starting, I don't know if we can call it agents, but my own GPTs on ChatGPT, and the projects thing is great. I don't know how often you hang out with like very big CEOs from very big companies, but
now and again.
I believe. But for example, I will be recording with the minister, the foreign affairs minister here within a few hours, and I was just thinking yesterday night on my ChatGPT that how often those dudes, I mean, ministers, see like, hundreds of thousands of employees, CEOs, and presidents. How do they really use those? I mean, on a day-to-day basis? Because if you don't know what you're talking about. I mean, it's just, and I believe at some point,
most of them don't.
Yeah, I know, and probably the thing that is good. I don't really agree with him on a lot of things, but within Donald Trump's administration is having Elon Musk and a lot of people there that use it like nerds, like on a day-to-day basis, and people who've built those things. And there is a major difference here. How can we make those people use it and think about it and change the way they will, manage their companies and their countries?
Well, it's part of the reason, like I wrote my previous book, Impromptu, is because it's kind of the first book on AI co-written with AI to show how it works, and also Super Agency to kind of get people into a kind of an AI curious mindset. But The short answer is every single time I sit with any of these world leaders, when I sit with the CEOs of various Fortune 100 companies, I'm like, you must be using it personally. Now, part of the reason they don't is they have staff. So, for example, like in generating a report, for example, a minister is going to come on and have a podcast with you. His staff will have generated a report that says, "Oh, this is what the podcast is about. Here are the kind of things to talk about. Here's some briefings on some of the key questions that you're probably going to get, et cetera, et cetera." And that's been true for centuries, and now, if the staff is any good, they're also using AI to generate that. But you're right that it isn't that they'll still have staff. Like, for example, very frequently when I, I work on things myself, but I also work on things with people who work for me. And part of it is they're using AI to do various things. And that's part of the loop by which we become productive as well. But people have to experience it some themselves to understand what the current game looks like. It's a little bit like if you say, well, my staff uses computers, but I don't. And
print my emails.
Yes, exactly. Does not work. Right. So you have to be, and this one's more serious than I don't use a smartphone or I don't use a computer. And so you have to at least be familiar with it. You'll probably still be, for example, if you're the CEO of a Fortune 100 company, you're probably not spending hours and hours and hours in front of Copilot, ChatGPT, Pi, any of these others. But your staff is. And you have to be aware of what the work looks like and, what are the things that you need to understand about how the whole game works and, what the expectations benchmark, what kinds of things to ask about. And if you're not somewhat familiar with the tool, at least to know about it, then you're not going to be as effective. You're going to be very sub-effective in your job.
And even worse, if your staff doesn't use it, it's worse. I mean, you have to show them and tell them, no, you're not using it or you're not using it right at some point. Yeah,
exactly.
We had that discussion with one of my co-founders recently, and he was talking with one guy of his team, and he said, "Did you use ChatGPT for that?" And the guy said, "No." And he said, "Yes, you did." And he said, No. I said, "Yes, you did. I can tell, but you didn't use it right." And at the end, the guy said, "Yeah, I did, but it was obvious."
Yes,
because when you know that,
yes,
it's interesting. It's very interesting. The thing on Europe also is that we are very much about climate, much more than other parts of the world. I would say China is a bit now, but it seems the US is not going in that direction now, at the moment at least. Not everybody over there, but
and there's still a large number of us who believe in the importance of climate and climate change, and all
including you. But but the whole country has been going out of the Paris.
Which a number of us, including myself, deeply regret.
But what I'm saying is that somehow I'd rather have everyone on board with that, and it would be better. But if China's not, it's going to be for us. I mean, how do you say an obstacle to innovation? Because like this morning, it was all about radio station talking about AI summit, and they were all talking about climate and pollution and data centers, and I was like, yeah, but so what we're going to do? Are we going to just say no? We're not going on AI, and we're going. I don't know. What can we do about that? Is it just? As far as not everyone is on board, we just have to go and fight for being the best on AI.
Well, I do think. So I think AI is the cognitive industrial revolution. I think it has the same level of impact in industries and human productivity that the Industrial Revolution is. Now, the Industrial Revolution was on the world of physics and atoms, and this is the world of information and bits, which will play into physics and atoms. And so part of the reason why I think, what the government is doing with the AI Action Summit here is critical, because I think it's play forward to, kind of how do we grow our prosperity? One of the stats I heard last year was a decade ago, Europe and the U.S. had about the same GDP. The U.S. now has 2x the GDP of Europe. You have to have a growth strategy. You have to be doing that. Technology is the primary thing for doing this. And I think that, being intense and directive in this, like really committing to this, I think is really important. And so, and it isn't just like I can offer, people, it's like today with AI technology, we can make a medical assistant that's available 24/7 that's better than a good doctor on your phone. That doesn't mean doctors go out of a job at all. Matter of fact, it's greatly amplifying to them because your medical assistant could then, say, here's the summary of the conversation that I've had with you. Let's share this with your doctor if that's okay. And then your doctor can see it and then spend time with you on the specific kinds of issues and how to do that. All of that kind of amplification is just part of our kind of how we live and how we work, or how we live, but also we need how we work. And I think that's one of the things that the kind of European approach of let's prepare it all beforehand. Let's not just like start going and, by the way, have some errors, have some accidents as we're going, and then be learning and iterating. That's really fundamentally important. And it's one of the reasons why I think it's important to do events like this.
Plus, we're not that bad on nuclear energy, so maybe we can solve things around that. Another concern we might have here in Europe is many people were shocked by how deeply intervened, I'm going to read these parts of the tech industry, with the Trump administration. And how do you see this relationship evolving, especially as AI becomes geopolitical tool? To me, it was kind of how do you say, some of them flipped completely. They just like, when you're in the Middle East, you talk about, I'm going to find the word, but it was like when you just bend over.
Oh, yes. Kneel before the
kneel. Yeah. It was kind of weird to us. I don't know if it was weird to you, but it was weird to us.
Well, a lot of the negative elements have been kind of widely reported. And obviously the concerning thing is, kind of the degree to which the administration may be trying to, kind of demand loyalty, in a personal sense. Now,
allegiance was the term.
Allegiance, exactly. Yeah. But on the other hand, there's an important silver lining here that I think is true for all governments. And if you said of any government, any Western style democracy, the government should be deeply connected with the tech industry, should be in dialogue with the tech industry. And there are many important industries, energy, finance, etc. But I think that the technology in some sense is now, I think, leading the way on these. And so I actually, as much as I, it's not a secret that I put a lot of energy into trying to get, Kamala Harris elected, but I was glad to see a bunch of the technology leaders, kind of clearly front and center in the discussion for, kind of with the current U.S. government. I think that should be true in every country, just at that level of abstraction. So, I think it's there's at least silver linings to the clouds.
Thank you. Before I leave you, I have a couple of questions. Regarding creating companies right now, I am Reid Hoffman. I'm 22. What would I do? What would you do? Where would you put all of your efforts?
Well, there's a general principle that you, as a startup founder, you don't want to be creating a company that 1,000 other people are creating at the same time. And because one of the things that then, even if you're very good and very lucky and everything else, it makes it very hard because, you're essentially, everyone's competing for the same capital, the same customers, the same employees, et cetera, for doing this. So generally speaking, you want to find your way to areas that, there's almost never zero competition, but like you're kind of, this is the contrarian but right kind of thinking, where you have some, where other people don't see the area that you may see. And that's part of the reason why the thing I recommend to founders is to go around and ask people what's wrong with my idea, but you also want to have smart people think your idea is not a good one. And you have a theory about why you're right and they're wrong. And that's a general thing. Now, so for example, that's part of having, the last few months founded Manas with Siddhartha Mukherjee, which is AI acceleration of drug discovery to cure cancer, and kind of driving that forward because there's, it's not just a software AI problem; it's also understanding in depth kind of the biopharmaceutical industry and reinventing both together. And relatively few people are doing that, whereas most people in AI are doing coding assistants and productivity assistants and chatbots, which is all great, but just there's a lot of it. Now, that being said, the other thing you have to identify is when is the now for technology? Because in a technology investment, speaking of investment, but entrepreneurs, founders it's a form of massive investment for the individual. In your ideal state from a venture capital perspective, when you founded it, people think you're a little crazy. And it's, and at 2 years, it's kind of obvious. And at 5 years, it's like, we always knew that was going to be big.
I knew it. Yeah.
Right. And so my investment in Airbnb at Greylock was like this, right? Which is like people just thought it was crazy that no one would stay in someone else's apartment or house. Then it was like, oh yeah, some people do that. Oh, this is an important change in an industry.
We should ban it. It's too big.
Yes.
No.
Yes. And so, that's frequently where you end up getting to. And so that's the kind of thing you're looking for. Now, AI is a very important area. It's not the only area. And sometimes when you look at areas, like I've invested in nuclear, both fission and fusion. Sometimes when you look at an area, you go, oh, it's a very hard area, but this is going to be really important. And so the timing will be right. It maybe take a little bit longer, but you build something that's really important. So you have to have a passion about it. Because one of the things about startups is, generally speaking, if you're not working, call it 50 plus weeks a year at 80 plus hours a week, you're not intense enough in your startup.
You're working 80 plus hours a week?
Yeah. Although I'm a co-founder of the startup, but yes, I'm.
Yeah, but it's co-founder of a few startups
yes,
now.
Exactly.
Plus writing books, plus.
Yeah. That's what it takes to do this. There is no 50-hour a week startup.
Are you a workaholic?
Some of my friends think I am. I just think I'm trying to get things done.
Do you have a balanced life somehow?
So there is no such thing as a balanced life in startups. You try to be able to make sure you get enough sleep, make sure you have dinner with, family and friends every so often. There's things for recharging. But startups are, 90% of them fail. And so it's a very intense thing to get into, like kind of trying to make them into something that really matters. And so it's your primary focus in what you're doing.
You have to admit that you won't be balanced if you go in that game,
yes,
right?
Exactly.
Right.
And by the way, people sometimes go in a startup and, I still want to take my year off, and that was the plan. You go in a startup and you go, okay, I'm now taking some time off, and I'll do whatever I do next after it. I mean, I've had friends who very successful entrepreneurs who spent 2 years sailing around the world in a sailboat, you can do the thing that, and it just, as you make your individual choice each time. And for me, at each time I've been, no, this next thing, it's more important for me to do this right now than take the year off. I am certain that I will have a 6 to 12 month sabbatical at some point before too long.
You would get bored, probably.
Yeah, or work on books or something. Who knows?
Reid Hoffman, super agency, impromptu. We can follow you on LinkedIn. Is the best place?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, of course.
We post now and then. Would you have another book? Not that a book that you didn't write to recommend us, something.
Oh, tons.
One above all.
Well, my co-founder of Inflection's Coming Wave, Mustafa Suleiman, is very good. A little bit more classic, but if people haven't read *Sapiens* by Yuval Harari,
of course,
very, very recommended. And then for entertainment, Martha Wells' Murderbot series in science fiction.
All right, I'll look into that.
Yeah.
You know what? Next time, you're based in Seattle, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Next time we come to the US, my dream would be to have a podcast with you and Peter Thiel. I mean, that would be my goal. Or just, I could not be here. I mean, I just would love to have that discussion with both of you. That must be insane what you're saying.
Occasionally.
Yeah, it must be quite fun because it seems to me you're so different in so many ways. And it's so interesting to see how you can be friends at some point. So, right.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Reid.
Yep,
it was a great
pleasure. Yes.
Yeah, great pleasure. Have a good one at the AI Action Summit, and
thank you. You too.
Enjoy Paris. Yeah, how long do you stay around?
I immediately after the summit I head off.
All right. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
See you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bravo, vous avez écouté cet épisode de Génération Do It Yourself jusqu'au bout. Je tiens à vous remercier de votre fidélité, de vos messages. Et si vous voulez m'aider, vous pouvez partager cet épisode à 2, 3, 5, 10 amis. C'est peut-être parce que vous l'avez aimé qu'il leur plaira aussi. Vous êtes, j'espère, abonnés. Si ce n'est pas le cas, abonnez-vous sur Spotify, sur Apple Podcasts, sur YouTube, un peu partout. Et puis sur nos réseaux sociaux, on est ravis de vous retrouver toutes les semaines. Vous pouvez aussi me laisser votre email sur gdy.fr/mail et je vous enverrai l'épisode de la semaine, ainsi que 2-3 bons plans. Je suis Matthieu Stefani et je vous embrasse.